All of history is moving like a mighty river towards the glorious second coming of the Lord Jesus Christ. Zechariah puts it this way: the burden of the word of the Lord for Israel, saith the Lord, which stretcheth forth the heavens, and layeth the foundation of the earth, and formeth the spirit of man within him. Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the people round about, when they shall be in the siege, both against Judah and against Jerusalem. In that day will I make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all nations. All that burden themselves with it shall be cut in pieces, though all the people of the earth be gathered together against it. In that day, saith the Lord, I will smite every horse with astonishment, and his rider with madness. And I will open my eyes upon the house of Judah, and will smite every horse of the people with blindness. And the governors of Judah shall say in their heart, the inhabitants of Jerusalem shall be my strength, and the Lord of hosts their God. In that day will I make the governors of Judah like a hearth of fire among the wood, like a torch of fire among the sheaves, and they shall devour all the people round about on the right hand and on the left. Then shall Jerusalem be inhabited again in her own place, even in Jerusalem. The Lord also shall save the tents of Judah first, but the glory of the house of David and the glory of the inhabitants of Jerusalem do not magnify themselves against Judah. It shall come to pass in that day I will seek to destroy all the nations that come against Jerusalem. And I will pour upon the house of David and upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and of supplication. And they shall look upon me whom they have pierced, and they shall mourn for him as one mourns for his only son, and shall be in bitterness for him as one that is in bitterness for his firstborn. Well, of course, before that great and glorious second coming of the Lord Jesus Christ comes, something else has to come first, doesn't it? And that's called what? I would not have you to be ignorant, brethren, concerning them which are asleep, that you sorrow not, even as others which have no hope. For if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so them also which sleep in Jesus will God bring with him. For this we say unto you by the word of the Lord, that we which are alive and remain unto the coming of the Lord shall not precede them which are asleep. For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, with the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the cloud to meet the Lord in the air. And so shall we ever be with the Lord. Wherefore, comfort one another with these words. That's imminent. That means it could happen any second. Well, what I'd like to do is do something I never do, and that's do a topical sermon. I never do it. Here's our key verse, our springboard, as it were. Of course, Jacob had many sons: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, fifth born. Reuben, of course, was disqualified from the birthright of being the heir because he slept with his father's wife. Simeon and Levi, next in line, you think your kids are bad. Okay. Simeon and Levi, next in line to be the heir, they're disqualified because, as you know, after their sister Dinah was raped by the men of Shechem under false pretenses, they made a covenant, a pact with the men of Shechem, that if you receive the token of the covenant, circumcision, you can be one of us. Of course, after they received the symbol of the token of the covenant, the scriptures say they were sore for 3 days, and then Simeon and Levi and their mercenaries went in and slaughtered every man, woman, and child in Shechem, making Jacob's name stink across all of Canaan. So they were disqualified from the... Judah's next. Now, Judah wasn't perfect. At least he tried to rescue Joseph. He slept with a Canaanite prostitute, Tamar, who gave birth to Pharez and Esron. Esron gave birth to Aram. Aram gave birth to Aminadab. Aminadab gave birth to Nasun. Nasun gave birth to Salmon. Salmon gave birth to Boaz. Boaz gave birth to Obed. Obed gave birth to Jesse. Jesse to David the king. So God works in mysterious ways. But the fifth-born son, Issachar, he was very well known, very famous in certain times of Israelite history, as you can see on the verse up here, for being able to understand the times He could, as it were, read the proverbial tea leaves, as it were, see which way the proverbial geopolitical winds are blowing, see the proverbial handwriting on the wall, and then that is good, but it's not complete. You have to do something with it. And then they knew what to do with the information, to implement it. This is how we should be, my friends. This is my goal for you for the next half an hour, to catch you up to date on what in the world, even though we don't need any signs, as I've just clearly spelled out in chapter and verse for the rapture to happen. We can just look around in the world and then see what's occurred the last 75 days and see the different actors on the stage, how everyone is in place, how everyone knows their lines, how the curtain's wiggling, and we're just waiting for that to happen, for him to come and to take us and then everything to unfold. Let's zoom in and start at the sacred land bridge that connects Africa and Europe and Asia. That would be Israel. In the last 75 days, Israel has celebrated its 76th birthday. 76th birthday. Israel, well, we'll start with his grandfather, Abraham. Abraham was born in 2165 BC. But if you do the math, and instead of doing BC and you do AC, which stands, of course, for after creation, what number do you get? Well, thanks for asking. We know from creation to the flood is 1,656 years, according to Ussher's chronology. It's a good one. If you have a better one, let me know. 1,656 years, creation to the flood. How about creation to Abraham? Very interesting. 1948, 1,948 years from creation to the birth of Abraham. And then, albeit in unbelief, in 1948 AD, in unbelief, his seed comes home slowly but surely. 100 years ago in 1924, if someone would have told you 100 years ago that Israel would be the equivalent of a superpower and no longer a backwater, third world, undeveloped Arab nation, you would say that's impossible. Now, nuclear bombs, fighter jets, the whole thing, just like that. 76 years old. But at 76, she's facing tremendous peril. She's on the edge of the abyss in many regards, not only spiritually, but her very life is in danger. Her physical life is in danger. As you can see from the map up there and from the news that you've read, Israel is facing a multi-front war as we speak. We'll take in Yemen, for example, in the south. Yemen, as you know, is governed by a group of people called the Houthis, and they are aligned, as everyone knows, with what's called the resistance, the Palestinian cause, the resistance. They have been able, through the help of others, primarily Iran and Russia, they've been able, as you know, to what's the word I'm looking for? Disrupt maritime traffic, all maritime traffic to Israel. So essentially in the Red Sea right there, the port of Eilat, the southern port of Israel, is closed. Israel is facing, even though we don't feel it and we don't think about it, Israel right now is facing an economic catastrophe right now. Catastrophe. So the southern port is closed. Okay, go on. What else has the Houthis of Yemen, one of the seven fronts, the axis of evil, as it were, with Iran being the octopus, the head, and the different tentacles and the different arms. Not only are they able to shut down the port of Eilat, but also they're able to destroy the Western counter-blockade. So America, they tried to find people to come with them. They can only get a few. Spain, France, Britain brought their cruisers, their destroyers, their battleships in order to try and fix the situation, and they ran home with their tail between their legs. Yemen, the Houthis, turban-wearing, sandal-wearing Arabs with rocket launchers have just sent the United States and its forces home. It's true. Absolutely true. Now they're getting even in they're getting moved up to first class from coach. Now they're getting the higher grade weapons from Russia because Russia said, okay, United States, you want to arm our enemies on our borders? We are going to arm your enemies on your proverbial borders, or the borders of your. So we're getting a taste, unfortunately, of our own medicine. And last week, as you know, Tel Aviv, for the first time by the Houthis, was attacked with a drone. Look how far that is. That's like way over 1,000 miles that the Houthis were able to send all the way across the Red Sea, all the way through the Sinai Peninsula, all the way through the Mediterranean Sea. Numerous drones, many of which were taken out, but one was not. The one hit just a hair's breadth away from the United States Embassy, killed an Israeli, and injured a dozen others. So a terrible nuisance on the south with the Houthis that is not going away anytime soon. Gaza, what do I have to say? The Hebrew word Gaza means strong, strong. Gaza was so strong that Joshua could not take it. He stopped short of Gaza, Joshua. Too big, too strong. David couldn't take Gaza. Too big, too strong, too complicated. The only way that Solomon could take Gaza is, as you know, through a political marriage with Pharaoh's daughter. That's it. Gaza historically sat at the crossroads of kind of like a Highway 4 and a Highway 95. Is that the one that goes to Jacksonville over there by Daytona, 95? Kind of like a 4 and 95, a crossroads at the main routes going to the main place. It's the international trade route, the Great Trunk Route, the historic, famous route that went from Egypt through Israel, touching Damascus, bending on the Fertile Crescent, touching Nineveh, down to Babylon and down to the Persian Gulf, the Great Trunk Route, the International Highway, the Fertile Crescent. It sat on that route, the north-south route. It also, Gaza, sat on the east-west route, the spice route that brought all those top-shelf goodies, the gold, the myrrh, the frankincense, the spices from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea. And then when that caravan got to Gaza in antiquity, they would unload those camels and then send those top-shelf goodies to the equivalent of all the Macy's on the eastern Mediterranean seaboard. Gaza has always been historically, except relatively recently, the minimum reach of Egyptian authority and power into Canaan. In Gaza, it is almost getting close to 300. 40,000 if you believe Hamas, the official Hamas numbers, 40,000 have died. Other, like what's the name of the journal? The Lance Journal, I think. They suggest 180,000 dead once you clear away all the rubble and all the everything. 180,000 dead. All the entry points are sealed. No one gets in. No one gets out. No food, generally speaking. No water. No medicine. It's changed lately, but at points in time, that's how it's been. And yet, despite all that, despite turning Gaza, destroying over half the buildings in Gaza, half the infrastructure in Gaza, destroying the electricity in Gaza, the cell phone towers in Gaza, the public water, everything in Gaza, collective punishment for killing 1,200, collective punishment. Despite all that, the head of Hamas, it's funny, his name is Sinwar, Sinwar, just did an interview with the New York Times and has said, or was it the Wall Street Journal? Same stuff. We have Israel exactly where we want them. That's what he said. They've succeeded in making the world a pariah, Israel a pariah to the world. They've succeeded in condemning them through the international courts, which we don't care about, but some people do. They succeeded in condemning them through the United Nations. They've succeeded condemning them on United States campuses. They've succeeded in condemning them through the United States Senate, the Congress, the Vice President, possibly the future President of the United States, met with the President of Israel this week and dissed him, publicly dissed him. Israel's in a precarious position. So you have the Houthis in the south and the Gaza Strip, an absolute horrid nightmare where it is as if the four horsemen of the apocalypse have been let loose. 4,000 children, innocents, living amputees And all they had to cut off their arms or legs was children's Tylenol. This is it. This is hell on earth. Like we can't even comprehend or even imagine. I just saw an interview with a doctor from the States who's been everywhere. Earthquakes, I mean, you name it, famines. He said all of them combined in his 30 years of service does not compare to what he experienced in Gaza in a couple weeks. Hell, as it were, being unleashed. Israel's also threatened on another front from the east. The Iranians, the Iraqi militias, etc., their desire, their dream, their fantasy, of course, is to conquer Jordan. Because if they can conquer Jordan through hook or by crook, then they'll be even closer to the borders of Israel. But the militias of Iraq, hundreds of these, or at least scores of these militias, are at it again. Just yesterday, another United States, we have 700 military bases scattered across the world, and scores of military bases in Iraq and in Syria. Did Iraq and Syria give us permission to put those bases there? No, we just did it. So you can see why the locals don't like us, and why the locals resist us, and why the militias resist us. Yesterday, once again, another American base hit, 2 days in a row, bam, bam. These militias in modern-day Iraq, and the border of Jordan, last week, again hit the port in Haifa in Israel, the other port, along with the Galilee and the Golan and etc. But Iran, of course, the master behind the curtain on the screen right there, is the great threat. On April 13th, the world changed. You say, what happened on April 13th? April 13th, that's when Iran attacked Israel. How did that change the world on April 13th? Well, let's backtrack a little bit. As you may remember, Israel had information that the heads of all the enemy tribes or clans in the north, Hezbollah, International Revolutionary Guard, etc., that these heads, not the head, but chieftains, sheiks, leaders, were meeting next to the Iranian embassy in Damascus. When Israel received word that all their eggs were in one basket, they went for it, and they blew up the building next to the embassy. That caused Iran's retaliation on April 13th. On April 13th, the reason the world changes is, number one, it exposed, and I'm the most pro-Israel, I'm more pro-Israel than Randall Price, if that's possible, okay? I lived there for 1,000 days. I was a missionary there with Jews for Jesus. I mean, I talked the talk and walked the walk. I put my neck on the line and went out on those ultra-Orthodox neighborhoods to share the faith of the Yeshua, the Jewish Messiah. So I'm not just like, talking from my couch like some kind of referee, okay? I've been there and I've done that. But the reason the world changed is because it exposed the myth of Israel's invincibility. The myth. Because this is all without God. Zionism is a state of Israel without Jesus, without God. That's why Biden's the greatest Zionist ever. The reason that Israel can act with impunity and the reason Israel can do what they're doing is because of Biden. Because he's the most Zionist president ever. Remember, Zionism is Israel apart from Jesus, apart from God. Now, the next president, possibly, Harris, she's the opposite. She is not pro-Israel. But on April 13th, Iran shot 300 drones to Israel. These drones were slow pace, about as fast as your car on 275. Israel could see them coming from a mile away. And their job was to collect information. So they got really close to the border of Israel. And then they were able to detect and to map where Israel was lighting up, where all the bombs, where air defense missiles were coming from, where are all of their assets at. So everything's now mapped out. They know where everything is for the next round. Done. Then they shot a second round in, and then a third round in, causing Israel to use all of its emergency defensive systems. The David sling, the one that goes up above the atmosphere into outer space, all these kind of things. Israel had to show its hand the whole time. So now they know, bad guys know where everything is, and they know everything that you have in your arsenal. Iran hit Israel a dozen times. You won't read that in the news, but it's true. 12 ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, hit their target. What was the Iranian target? There are targets where the Air Force bases that those jets, Israeli jets, took off from to kill the chiefs, the sheiks in Damascus. And what did they hit at the military bases in Israel? The most fortified, protected base in all of Israel. Iran penetrated it easy. You know what they blew up? The swimming pool. Just to mess with them. Just to show them what we can get you where we want and when we want. Israel's panicking. 50,000 reservists have just been called up because of the war in Gaza. Israel is lacking tanks. They don't have tanks like they need. They don't have spare parts like they need. They do not have munitions. They do not have shells. Why don't they have these kind of things? Well, part and parcel is because, unfortunately, they rely on others to give them to them, namely the United States. And certain people in the Biden administration slow walk. They slow walk the weapons that Israel needs. They're all liberal, left-wing, pro-Palestinian, anti-Christ, who hate Israel and are doing everything within their means to help bring about their destruction. That's what's happening as we speak. Israel is now in control of it's called the Philadelphia Corridor, the border between Israel and Egypt, or between Gaza and Egypt. This is very key. The border between Gaza and Egypt. Why is that key? Because just an arm's breadth from that, a stone's throw from that corridor, is the famous Wadi el-Arish. What is that? That is the river of Egypt. The southern boundary that God promised the children of Israel in the Abrahamic covenant. In Genesis 15, it's called the river of Egypt. It's not the Nile, it's Wadi el-Arish. And Israel controls the wall between Gaza and Egypt, and right there, boop, is the southern boundary of Israel. Who knows? Maybe in God, in his mysterious dealings, is setting things up for that. It's very possible. Lebanon in the north, speaking of this multi-front war, Lebanon has shot more than 5,000 missiles into Israel since October 7th. 5,000, 250 sometimes, 300 a day. Yesterday, in the capital, as it were, of the Golan, as you may have heard, they hit a site called Migdal Shams. Migdal means tower. Killed 12 children in the soccer field. Blew them to smithereens using Iranian-made weapons. 75,000 Israelis and 75,000 Lebanese have been forced to move from their homes on the border. You have to live in a Motel 6 the last 300 days. No kitchen, no, you don't have your yard, you don't have your laundry, you don't have you're living in an apartment for the next 300 days. And not a nice apartment either. These people are frustrated. They want to move back home. They want their life to return to normal. And it can't until the Great War happens. And it's coming. It's imminent, this battle. In Iran, so many interesting things are happening. The president, as you know, on end of April, I believe it was, Ebrahim Raisi was killed. The president, the head of Iran, murdered, assassinated. God did it. One of those, who knows? They now have a new president as of a couple of weeks ago who has essentially just picked up where the old president has left off. The people in Iran, the religious, the equivalents of you people, the Muslims, they are praying to and waiting for the revelation of the last of the 12 imams, the Mahdi, the Antichrist kind of figure to come and to put right what went wrong. Their eschatology in some ways is similar to ours. It's perverted and damned, but it's similar in a sense. There's certain dots that connect. So just like we're waiting for Jesus to return, the Muslims, any devout Muslim worth their salt is praying for the 12th Imam, the Mahdi, to return. Iran, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Taliban, who we left $40 billion worth of weapons in Afghanistan. Remember that? All of them have publicly proclaimed that they're ready to join Hezbollah in the war against Lebanon. I could go on forever, but I can't, unfortunately, because I have a different subject for the next presentation. But in China, for example, has a dog in the hunt in the Russia-Ukraine war, the largest land war in Europe since World War II. 500,000 Ukrainians have died in the last 850 to 900 days. China, in President Xi's first trip since the plague, you had the plague, COVID, now you have the war. First trip in 5 years, goes to Europe, visits France first because that's what you have to do, even though they're not important to him. Where did he go after France? Because that's what's important. Hungary and Serbia. Hungary and Serbia. Why? Because there will be a new Silk Road from China to Europe that goes through conquered Ukraine and that makes its way into Hungary and down into Serbia. That's the master plan. Russia recently met with the heads of Hamas and Fatah to put everybody, Fatah is the kind of like the left-leaning liberal kind of Democrats of Palestinian society, whereas Hamas is more, ultra-Orthodox, right-wing conservative, as you know. But they met, Putin met with Fatah and Hamas not too long ago. But yesterday, or this last week, I should say, it was revealed that China has gathered themselves together, the 14 different heads of the different tribes. We're in the Middle East, guys, okay? 14 heads of the different tribes or clans or factions that represent the Palestinians. China gathered all 14 of these people under one roof. The head of Hamas, the head of Fatah, and all the different family, local tribes and clans. 14 under one roof, and they're now all on the same page 100% in a unity agreement. So China is the one who will say, or I should say China is the broker who will have their say in who governs Gaza the day after. Not America. China. Why? Because it's Palestinian land. It's not Israeli land. It's in God's eyes, it's Israeli land. But for the time being, it's Palestinian land. Russia and China have united America's enemies against us. They've been able to form these alliances that would have never happened. Like what? Saudi Arabia and Iran are now BFFs. Saudi Arabia and Iran have been at each other's throats for decades, but now they're allies, bringing their enemies together. Let's go finish it up at home real quick. I don't have time to go on. I wish I did. What's going on the homestead? Well, I got 5 minutes left. The nuclear clock, which is done by a bunch of liberals, which is fine. It's at 11, it's the closest it's ever been to midnight. 11:58 and 30 seconds. See, this is just the tip of the iceberg, what's besides the book of Revelation and everything that's rushing around in my head. And when I'm at the airport and I'm looking at people, no one cares. Their heads are in the sand. They're consumed with the worries of this world. They're living for the moment and not for eternity. And they have no clue at what in the world is unfolding all around them. If things continue to go the way they're going overseas in the largest land. By the way, every huge land war in Europe, World War I, World War II, it never, ever stays confined to Europe. Land wars in Europe, global wars, they always go global. And that's what's going to happen too, perhaps. 14 weeks until the election, people. 14, that's it. 24 weeks until the new president is signed in. You're going to have the most volatile 14 to 24 weeks. You are in the most dangerous point of American history right now since George Washington crossed the Potomac River. No, we're not. Not in sunny Tampa. Well, okay, maybe not here in sunny Tampa, but you are. Don't be deceived. Viktor Orban, the president, and we'll be done in 2 minutes. The president of Hungary, don't take it from me. What did he say? The president of Hungary. He said, we are centimeters away from the abyss. Vučić, the president of Serbia, what did he say recently? He said the train has left the station, the proverbial train has left the station, and there's no stopping it. Well, we want to be like the sons of Issachar. Not only do we want to be able to discern the times, read the proverbial tea leaves, the handwriting on the wall of what God's doing in the world, because according to Daniel chapter 2, he's the one who still sets up kings and takes down kings and sets up thrones and takes down thrones. So this is all him doing these things, raising up one and taking down another. And we get what we deserve. So if we get Harris in 14 weeks, the people of America deserve that. Late term, 8 weeks, 3 months, 6 weeks, go ahead. Man, man, woman, woman, man, whatever. Just do what you want, when you want, with who you want. We're there. So we want to take this information and we want to act wisely. How do we act wisely? Get out of debt when it all pops. Maybe in your lifetime, maybe not in your lifetime, but when the house comes tumbling down, you want to be out of debt, hopefully. You want to have your house paid off. 3 to 6 months. Proverbs commends the man who has oil and treasure stored up in his house. And of course, most importantly of all, we have to ask ourselves, what manner of person are we? In all holy living and godliness. What are we doing that's making a difference for the glory of Jesus day in, day out until he comes back? Because we know he's coming back quickly. We don't need all these things to show us that. It just reinforces that fact. He loves us. He has a plan for us, as you know. But it's up to us to do our part, as it were. Sooner than later, we're going to meet him. And once we meet him, as you know, there's no settling the score. What's done is done. The dead cannot praise Yahweh. So let's use everything we have within our power to make the greatest difference we can in the world for Jesus' glory before he comes back. Amen?